Okay, we will call this meeting to order. First of all, I would like to award or congratulate Town Drumheller on the winning of the award for the Dino Walk. It's just incredible that out of 45 people we were acknowledged, so that's pretty cool. So congratulations to everybody involved in that. And thank you to everyone involved in July 1st. I heard just so many rave reviews. Darren, you and your staff, unbelievable. Armia, I hope you got some rest. You're up pretty late. A couple nights there, and Chamber of Commerce. It was just shows an example of all the forces going together and pulling in the right direction. So it was amazing. Next year we got the 100th year for the fire department, so that'll be exciting. So is there any additions or deletions to the agenda? I just have one to add on 5.1.3. I'd like to add the 10th Avenue Southwest concern. I know we had the stop signs, but I just want to add the 10th Avenue Southwest concern. I just didn't want to assume. Okay, now we will swear in Christine for the deputy mayor for the next 2 months. So here we go.
I, Christine Demott, do swear that I will diligently, faithfully, and to the best of my ability execute according to the law the office of Deputy Mayor for the town of Drumheller for the months of July and August 2018. So help me God.
Welcome, Christine. I got a new partner beside me. Okay, now we'll move on to 5.1.1 public participation survey questions overview. Daryl?
Thank you, Your Worship. So at the last council meeting, we had discussed, or committee meeting, we discussed the public participation policy. So for those who weren't in attendance, the MGA is requiring that we must, the town, all communities must have a public participation policy in place, approved by council by July 23rd of this year, which is 3 weeks away. So so in front of you, part of your package was sort of a draft example of a policy, and I would hope that people have kind of looked at it. But one of the things that did come out of it was that we really wanted to ask the public what we thought, how they wanted to be communicated with, and what kinds of things that they wanted to talk about. So at the back of the package, we actually did I think it was over a 5-day period, we did a survey in person, through our website, through social media advertising, and we had actually really good response. We had about 210 responses for a short period like that, so it was really quite good. The folks that were doing that were actually quite happy with that. So so just on those pages, just to kind of give you some feedback, which actually I thought a lot of the stuff was really very positive or good information. So most people wanted to hear about feedback through digital, so again through social media, online. Second was kind of radio and open houses, so just sort of a combination that was up in there. So and then really the least on that side was representative participation. So that was basically where people are asked to kind of join committees and stuff like that. So people really weren't that interested. They weren't as interested as they were hearing about public consultation as they were through digital means. So, and that doesn't surprise me in a way, I guess. Most people are busy now, so it's a way to communicate well with people. On the next one, we asked them, what do you want to communicate? What do you want to be communicated with? And the number one answer, just by a hair, was the services provided by the town. So I would assume that would mean things like our water, sewer, cutting grass, trees, the services we provide for recreational and stuff like that. And then right after that was the identification of council priorities. So again, 2 highly rated ones. So personally, I think that's great. We've tried to talk about how we communicate our council priorities once they're identified. And maybe this is a way to feed into the actual doing this before the council priorities are kind of determined or set by council, if that, again, is just as a suggestion. And then sort of the next question 3, was just rating the top 5 areas that how'd they like to be informed by it. So again, social media was the number 1, and then direct mail was a surprisingly number 2. So that might be a bit of demographic. Radio was 3, and then we asked people if they wanted to be communicated was they come into town hall or to the BCF and have staff there. So that was our sort of tied with open houses as the last. So just go through it a little bit more. So again, how do you want to be informed of the results? Again, most people want to be informed through digital, whether it be on our website or through social media. That's again no surprise there. And the others are all pretty similar, other than and there really weren't. I think some of the comments that were in there was a myriad of responses that really nothing was sort of tangible as far as an actual result there. So, sorry, just how long? And then question about how long in advance of an activity should we be doing public participation on a topic? And the number 1 was kind of 6 to 10 days, and then 11 to 15. So again, idea was give people enough time to kind of go out and actually plan to actually respond, and leave it open long enough to give people choices to be able to do it. They don't have a very tight period to do it. I guess in the business of public participation, though, you kind of balance that against, if you give people too much time, they tend to forget about it. And so you want to be able to have some strict deadlines to make people have that, I really need to do it now or I might not be heard. So to balance that, sort of those two sides on there. So evening was the 6:30 to 7:30 was by far the most popular time if you were going to have open houses or any other events like that for the public. So kind of right after the supper hour. So and second was right after work, kind of 5:30 to 6:30. So again, kind of interesting that. So those were by far the biggest time, and it probably just again because people are either getting home from work late or just wanting to do it on their way home. So. And then I guess when we look at the age group part, so which I thought was quite interesting, because again, the number 1 comments was how you wanted to be told or heard about this and how you want to communicate with social media and the website. That the number 1 group, or the largest percentage of group, was 45 to 54. So I think now, if I understand, Facebook kind of actually caters to a predominantly older grouping, so they're not, the under 25 are mostly into Instagram and some other chatting services. So that probably doesn't surprise me, although I did think that is interesting that those groups 45 to 65 plus do make up the majority of the people that responded. So, and yet they want to see it done on social media and the website. So, and then the last one was just sort of it's kind of a categorization for us that the majority of people by far live within the town of Drumheller. So that's it. Any questions on that?
Fred?
Daryl, is there a possibility as we go along with this, we could look at, and I know we touched on the possibility of having an app that people can download, and then we can sort of address by postal code and stuff like that. Would that become a part of the participation? Can we leave something open where in the future maybe we can bring that online? So
yeah, so absolutely we can leave it open. Like this wasn't, again, this was sort of how do you, for the stuff that exists today, how do you think you want to be communicated with, involved?
Great.
We've actually just yesterday, as a matter of fact, sort of followed up with someone that we're going to talk to this summer about. I think they used Abbotsford as an example of one of their customers. So again, there's several outfits out there that do this kind of work. So it's part of our role is to be able to look at how we're engaging the public there. And again, you can do it very inexpensively or very expensively, depending on how many features and feature sets you want to be able to add in there for people. So,
okay, thank you.
Anybody else? Jane?
Thanks, Your Worship. I think the feedback that probably has been consistent enough that needs to be integrated is that the knock on our public hearings has been their timing for a very long time and we continue to hold them at the beginning of whatever meeting, council or committee, whatever is going to be happening that day. And I'm not sure why it would be difficult to begin our regularly scheduled council or committee meeting and at 4:30 when we usually meet, and then adjourn it at 5:30 temporarily, recess it, not adjourn it, but recess it. Hold whatever public hearing is supposed to be held at 5:30 until it's concluded, and then reconvene whatever council or committee meeting is to occur. Because the community's been quite clear with us over the years that they find that 4:30 time very difficult. I'd like to give them a go as on a pilot project at least to see if it does have an impact on turnout. We typically get very poor turnout for most public hearings, unless there's something controversial, which this council has yet to experience. But I have a feeling it might as soon as we deal with cannabis consumption. But the holding of things at 4:30, I think, has got to stop when it comes to involving the public.
Sorry, and yeah, I think that we can, if council agrees that that's what time they want to hold it at 5:30 or 6:30 even, I think it was just one of those probably historical hangover that we've held it there because it's always been held at that time. But,
and impervious to feedback, because this will be the third time I've said this in 7 years.
Yeah.
Tom?
So this is a little bit weird, but the most effective communication medium that we have in the town of Drumheller is the grapevine. That there are people in this community who know everything that's going on all the time. And I'm being a little bit facetious, but a little bit serious here, where I honestly think that we have to create a network of people who might volunteer to be people in this community who communicate to other people in this community. Because it seems like over and over and over again, we have something that is going on and nobody knows anything about it. You can use every media option you can and nobody knows everything about it. But guess what? So-and-so knows about it, and so-and-so knows about it, and these people seem to know what's going on in the town before I know. I mean, they know what's going on in the town hall before I know what's going on. They, without a word of a lie, when I was at the school, something would happen at the school. My wife would be asking me about it by the time I got home. Like, there are people in this community that have just absolutely the most amazing network of communication with other people and friends and relatives and whatever, that maybe we should do that. Maybe we should say, do you want to be a town source of communication information or something? And I can just think of, and we can all, you know what I'm saying? We can all think of a half a dozen people just off the top of our head. They know what's going on in this town before you know, before I know, before anybody knows. So I'm just wondering if maybe that's stupid, but it seems like over and over again we try all sorts of different media, and I will have people come in, well, I didn't know that, and I didn't know that. Anyways, my opinion.
So I think what you talk about there, and I'm struggling with the acronym now, but what you're looking at is you want to get champions in the community. So that the challenges that you have to be able to get those folks, you almost have to be able to have a discussion with them at some point, be it in person or via some other tool, to be able to give everyone the same message, or else it becomes the telephone game. And that's the only fear I would have. And the problem would be that if I was one of those people and you told me something that I didn't really care about, I may not purposely or may purposely decide that I want to misconstrue that information a little bit, because I'm not in favor of it. So I think you'd have to be careful about how we actually would do that. My sense is that that's a pretty big rabbit hole you'd be going down to actually engage people like through that medium. So on a variety of topics.
Jane?
A way that it could work, and I think it is I understand exactly the provisos that you're putting in place, Daryl, because it would have to be people that are naturally skewing towards being supportive of what the town is about. And but it is a recommendation in the task force report, and I would imagine a version of it will come up as a 2019 strategic priority, and that's to have ambassadors. And there's no reason why those ambassadors can't also be dialed in, especially if part of the responsibility is that they attend meetings to become informed and aware of what's going on. And so there's nothing, but it also, we have to acknowledge that it is absolutely a 40 plus phenomenon, that's your major source of information. It is certainly to the detriment of this community that the major source of information for anyone under that demographic age is the Drumheller and Area Discussion Board, because too infrequently for our own mental health do we engage to try to deal with the erroneous information. You'll recall what a pleasure it was the last time you tried to do that. And so I think that we can probably try to address that, the thread of what Tom's getting to with a program where those people who are out and about promoting what's going on in this community to our own citizens and to visitors alike might have an expectation to be involved or aware, certainly, of at least some of the major priorities of council and that sort of thing. So I don't have an issue with building that. I think we're going to be looking at building a program like that, and why not have it have an information component?
Sorry, just as I say, I think my comment was I wasn't thinking that your thought of sort of people that are supportive of the community. I'm not even thinking you want that. I think as long as you're willing to, we want to make sure we have people trained or developed to provide the same factual information that they're hearing, good or bad, right? Because again, you would use them to deliver both messages, perhaps, right? Use that route, but as long as the information doesn't get skewed along the way, so that would be the goal. And we can do that through, again, through training with people to do that. There's lots of opportunities to be able to work on that. So,
anybody else? The only comment that I've heard, Daryl, on this is that on that written information, if we threw it in the water bills as well, since they're going out anyways, and I know you guys do a lot of stuff through that anyways.
So it's interesting because so of the group here, to quick poll, who gets a water bill electronically versus a paper copy still? Electronically? Okay. So how many people read last month's insert? That'd be good for you. One of the challenges that we've gone through, and I remember this from my previous thing, is that once we start switching to electronic bills, is people tend to start forgetting the actual attachments that come with it, the notices. So it does work, but it is a bit of a challenge to get people to kind of read that. It's almost like you have to put something on the bill itself saying, "Hey, watch me, please read this attachment," with a hyperlink. So, but absolutely, I think that there are lots of great opportunities to be able to provide that information through other means. So. Just one more comment on this. So I'm not sure if anyone's or everyone's read the sort of two versions of the policy for public participation, but are there any concerns on it right now? Is that something that during the roundtable that council wants to discuss? But remember that we want to get this approved next week at council meeting, so that just if there's anything there to kind of bring it to our attention if we need to make changes or not. So. And again, we can discuss it during the round. You can discuss it during the roundtable. So. Okay.
Let's go on to 5.1.2.
Okay. And 3. So again, this was the so not unlike the ambassador conversation we just had. So part of this discussion around the stop signs and around 10th Avenue was based on probably the last 3+ years of residents in the area of Hillsview and parts of Bankview who'd indicated that they were the representatives of their community and had actually wanted to slow or divert traffic from the area of cutting through. And of course, First Street was a big thoroughfare. People would cut through down First Street over to 10th. It's a very narrow street in part because there's parking on both sides of the street. There's school buses in the area, lots of school kids running to their stops. And so the idea was that as a residential street, First Street there should be stop signs in there to prevent through traffic from just being able to race up the street from number 9, and that being a collector street, the 7th Avenue, what you want to do on collector streets is allow traffic to flow freely through there without the ability to stop. So that's why those stop signs were switched on those corners. Now the problem and the lesson learned from it is that you don't trust when someone tells you that they've spoken and have everyone agreed with them. The question is that what does everybody mean to them? Because it apparently, when we've heard, and we've all heard this, that there was a lot of people that were never talked to who were immediate neighbors up there by the groups that had actually approached the town. And it was, I know that it was probably the second thing on my list when I came to the town 2 years ago, that was to do something about this area. It had been a priority given to the mayor and to the CAO at the time. So it had been one of these things that had been there for quite some time. So again, we did some traffic studies. We talked to the people who had told us that they were the representatives, and those folks never wavered. There was never different groups of people up there. So again, that kind of just explains a little bit about where we are with this. If we look at what we want to do up there, and the goal is to actually reduce the amount of traffic that's cutting through the neighborhood, I think putting a 4-way stop sign there will certainly slow people down on 7th. However, what I suspect, of course you don't know until you try, but is that people will simply cut up 2nd or 3rd up to 8th, over to 8th to 1st, and then cut up still up on 10th Avenue. So you're actually going to increase the traffic on the residential streets up there. You're not going to change it at all. My sense and what we had discussed at one point a year or a year and a half ago was to actually block off 10th. So essentially put in speed humps, which is like a traffic calming thing. So very large humps that force people to slow down, which makes them want to avoid the area, or to actually put up barricades and basically like concrete barricades and basically block off 10th from through traffic. So if you're going up 1st, there's no place to go but 1st. You can't turn onto 10th. And if you're going down 10th westbound, there is no place that you can actually turn to actually cut through the neighborhood up there. So if we would like to, and what we want to do now, of course, again, lessons learned, is that we want to go out to the community and kind of give them those suggestions. Because again, part of the issue is that we've heard for more than 3 years that traffic is a significant issue up there. And I guess the problem is that a very small sampling of people, or is that a lot of the people that are saying that that's an issue? I know when we've done the traffic studies, we get 600 to 700 vehicles a day going down 10th at the 10th and 1st intersection, which in my mind is an awful lot for a residential area, right? So it's not insignificant at all. So I would think that looking at closing that off after talking to all the people in the area to see if that's something that they would be willing to deal with. We have to talk to the school buses because of course they use 10th right now to go on to 1st to be able to go down and collect the students on there. So now they'd have to figure out a different way to go there. Down 1st. I've seen them myself.
But I believe they turn from 8th. They turn it on 8th onto 1st. I don't think they come across on the 10th.
Unless they turn south on 1st, go up to the cul-de-sac and turn around, because I've seen kids stopped, congregated on the corner of 10th and 1st, waiting to get on a bus. So, but again, and maybe they move it around a little bit, because I've also seen kids on 8th recently. So again, we'd want to talk to them about how and where they flow through there as well. So there had also been some discussion, and actually some of the residents along 7th had asked about the possibility of either speed humps along sort of near the Elgin Hill area. So again, trying to prevent people cutting up from the highway, going up Elgin Hill, and then using that as a shortcut. Personally, I think that would actually be a pretty good thing to do to try to reduce the amount of traffic. However, you have to balance that with trying to get people that are going to shortcut through residential streets or back lanes in the area, just to kind of try to avoid the perception of a stoplight or a stop sign or something like that. So what I'm recommending is that we can go out to the community this July and actually say to them, okay, here's what we want to do, or here's some suggestions. What do you think of these suggestions? And if there's some other suggestions they want that make good sense, then we would look at implementing those. So.
Fred?
Thanks, Daryl. That sounds like a great plan to go back and talk to those people. In the meantime, I know that I've been a champion for four-way stop on 7th and 1st for now since I got hit the first time, and been attended accidents at that intersection. I wouldn't mind until the July having that go revert to a four-way stop while we're considering. And further, a couple other suggestions. One being that the people that are in that Bankview end that are complaining about traffic going through, it's hard to tell where they're coming from, but I know in front of our house on 8th and 1st, traffic's terribly fast. I wouldn't mind seeing another three-way stop on 8th and 1st. The idea being is that we're in a residential area. If through traffic, if we can slow them down a little bit or make it inconvenient, then they'll look at the main routes for doing their traveling and go back to the highway where they should be going around instead of cutting through neighborhoods. So those are two suggestions, and I know I've heard I got a lot of comments from a lot of people over this last week. The other one I would suggest until July would be to add 2 more speed bumps on 10th, one about the middle and one on the other end, because it's not just the people on this end that are feeling the speed. And as soon as they go over the 1st and 10th speed bump, then they're to the floor the rest of the way until they get over to the exit on that S curve. So I think we've got to make it inconvenient for those people that want to just zoom through there.
Anybody else? Christine?
I definitely would agree with Fred on the idea of a four-way there, just because I went through there the other day and I stopped muscle memory. Like I'm stopping there all the time. I know that there are people that are still doing that, and it's been kind of a confusing little spot. So I think I do agree with having the four-way at 7th and 1st.
Tony?
Yeah, I think we have to do something temporary. There seems to be an issue there, and a temporary four-way, I think, would solve that until we can get in the results of maybe a good time to test this public participation thing as well. Ideally, it would be an open house, but not everybody makes it to it. I think the final result has to be driven by that community. So if it's an online survey or an open house type format, we need the input of that area. But I think we have to deal with it temporarily in the interim.
Fred?
Sorry, there's oh my goodness, did I lose my train of thought? One of the other things I wanted to ask you, was there ever when Bankview was as Bankview down on towards the big berm towards the west, was there any thought of putting another exit there that joined in with the Elgin Hill? Like, I mean, wouldn't that eliminate a lot of the traffic if we could take that whole housing end down there and send them over to Elgin and then through the intersections rather than directing everything through residential traffic?
I don't recall that there was any right of way struck there for that. I think one of the challenges you have, again, from a traffic engineering point of view, I hate to hear that word, but is that you're actually putting traffic right over a vertical curve, and so you're bringing them over a hill and then down sort of on Elgin Hill as it goes around a horizontal curve, and you're doing a vertical curve at the same time, and you're generally not doing that in a residential area very well. But notwithstanding that, I don't think there was any right of way that was kind of allocated for that. So,
okay, one further thing. When I was at the FCM conference, I had a long conversation with a company out of Red Deer, and believe me, after 10 years on the police committee and having that, council asked me to look into photo radar, being completely against it until I talked to this group. who takes it from a different point of view. What they do is come into a community, they put their monitoring devices through the entire community. The results are put up online with a number of offenses over a period of time, getting a database of the entire town and where we have problems, school zones, playground zones, side streets, thoroughfares like we're dealing with on First Street. And then they, with our blessing, go into those areas until they bring the statistics down and give out tickets, photo radar tickets. Once that area is under control and the averages show that that area has been, the behavior in that area has been changed, then they move to another area. But instead of it just being a thoroughfare and one light that stays there forever, it actually moves and polices the entire community based on the statistics that show that that area is being abused as far as speed and traffic. And I don't know, it could be something to look into in the future, because it's obvious that with the number of police we have now, we don't have enough coverage to get everybody. And I'm starting to lose my patience with people speeding through playground zones, school zones, residential streets, and I don't know what the answer is. But this is only one problem in our town, and I know a lot of other residential people are complaining about the same problem. Maybe the idea is if we're in residential areas, we're going to have to reduce the speed altogether.
Jay?
Thank you, Your Worship. Daryl, I'm glad you used the phrase traffic engineering, because I think it's an important point that needs to be brought up again, and that is these decisions were made for a reason, with thoughtfulness behind them. I think we didn't do so good on the rollout because there wasn't the advance warning that should have been there. But at the same time, the intention is to steer people away from the interior of a residential subdivision, right? I can wait.
Sorry, Christine.
Is that a different company that comes in and does the radar, or is that our
This is a company out of Red Deer. It's new technology. It's nothing that I've ever seen before. The other ones that I've seen is like Edmonton and Calgary, where they're in one location only. This, they go in and do a study of the entire town, and they move with the violations. If they see an area, say McCompney Park or Kinsman Park or something like that, we have consistently showing that people are offending in that area. We go in and do the control until statistics come down, and they move to another area. It's static. It moves everywhere, rather than it's more dynamic. Sorry, rather than static. It doesn't sit in one place. It moves where we need the control. But certainly, I think it's something to investigate. I really do.
And how's the funding for that? Like, how's the funding model?
The funding model is they get the money from the revenue from the tickets. But we're looking at the map and looking at the findings, we drive where we want it to be. What areas we want to be studied. They come back with statistics and real-time results. So as the tickets are being handed out, we're watching it. As the data is being gathered, you can go online and see where the areas are, you know. So and it's static. It moves, or dynamic. It moves around the community as we need it. Areas, you know, there might be a dozen of them out in a community that move constantly.
Wasn't Lisa after all?
I don't know. I couldn't get the door to hold, so I daren't cover it up for me.
So what I was trying to say was that the decisions that were being made are with the intention to drive traffic away from a park with a playground, and that's my neighborhood. I've lived there for almost 20 years, and the idea of taking back a decision that has yet to be given an opportunity to see if it works concerns me greatly. We pay people a significant amount of money for expertise, and I understand that if we had a product to export, it would be resistance to change. We are excellent at that. But people will adapt. They already have. Slowing to some place where there used to be a stop sign and there isn't anymore is confusing. But it's not a crime to slow down and almost come to a stop. It is a crime to blow through one. And so if we're very, very concerned about the speed on 7th and still about the speed on 10th after the speed bump, then let's demand some enforcement from, our bylaw officers are allowed. We could retask them for the entire month of July to do nothing but traffic enforcement in those areas. They are qualified and able to do so, if I understand correctly. And if we need the RCMP to do that in addition, then we should be communicating that need. We pay good money, and they should be more than willing to listen to our priorities as they develop. But I'm concerned about a message that it sends to the public that we don't know what we're doing, so we're going to go back on a decision that hasn't been even given 2 weeks to work yet. The speed cart that monitors traffic should be put back on 10th so we can see what happens with traffic flow and whether or not, in fact, people are speeding as soon as they get. Just face it the other way there, right? But I'm really reluctant to decide that driving a road is the same as being a traffic engineer. Those two things are very, very different. And so the goals that we're trying to achieve here are still the important ones, which is encourage traffic on collector roads, discourage traffic on residential streets. Why on earth wouldn't we give this idea a chance to work? And then address it if it clearly isn't. But I traverse both the 10th, 1st, and 7th on a daily basis. I've yet to see even a close call since the stop signs have changed. And if it has the desired impact, then why on earth would we undo something like that? So let's measure it. Let's see what happens.
Tom?
Yeah, I'm not a resident in that area, but I do travel through there. And I don't need to travel through there quickly. I can go at whatever speed. And the people that I've talked to who live in the vicinity say that there is a safety issue. That just having the stop signs the way that we have them right now on 1st, that their kids are at risk. And so I look at it as, to me, you err on the side of safety. If there's any suggestion that there's a safety issue, you have to go that way. I mean, because the alternative is not good. So that's the way I would look at it.
Fred?
Just so you know, Daryl, I'm not second guessing you as a traffic engineer. I realize that everything academically has its points and theoretically should work as you have them. Unfortunately, Drumheller is Drumheller, and Airdrie is Airdrie, and what we learn sometimes we talked about it last time, the crosswalk down by the neighbors shouldn't be a crosswalk, but people are going to cross there. The street we're talking about is a street that people carry on quite fast, and I've had residents on 7 say, well, if I'm not a residential area anymore and I'm on this street, then make my taxes reflect that, because I'm a resident too. I don't think, if we're gonna err on one side or the other, I don't think putting a 4-way stop is admitting that we don't know what we're talking about. Rather, until we sort this out in July, and or August, I'll bow to whatever comes out of the public consultation. But at this point, we slow things down, and then if we do go back to a 2-way, then we introduce it properly and get people aware of it. That's my say.
So,
Go ahead.
Just a couple of comments. So, as we've mentioned a couple of times, 7th is a collector street. So it's not the only one in town. Right? Riverside is a collector. It has no 4-way stop on it. It has it at the very end of where it was meeting another collector street. So 2 collectors. Newcastle Trail, no stop signs on there. 1 stoplight at one end, and then it kind of peters out to nothing. Hunter Drive is a collector. Stop signs at the 2 ends of traffic. In Midland, same thing along the river, Collector Street. So there are lots of examples already where we already have collectors and we do not actually impede the traffic because, of course, we want to get people out of the neighborhood and not cut through the neighborhood. So I'm not saying that that's not something that we would treat differently, but one of the challenges is that change is hard for people. And so when you had this stop sign here before, of course, all the people on 7th were quite happy with it because everyone stopped there. All the people on 1st were quite unhappy because everyone simply cut up from Drum FM and simply go straight up through 1st. So again, if we put a four-way up, my sense would be is if we put the four-way up right away, the first thing I want to do is actually measure traffic that starts cutting through 2nd, 3rd, and 4th, because I will guarantee that will actually start happening. And so then now all we're doing is moving the problem a little bit further west. So right into a playground zone and through, again, more residential areas. So again, it's more of that. That's something we want to do on a short-term basis, and while we look at it and look at the data from it and then evaluate from that point, I think that's okay. However, just recognize that one change will again create a cascading effect through that neighborhood. So.
Tom?
Maybe I'm assuming incorrectly here, but did we not talk about blocking off the Hills View through road as well?
I suggested that.
To me, that would be in conjunction with the four-way stop.
Right, but again, so now...
And that would solve the problem in Bankview.
Right, but I think what we talked about also was actually going back to the community to make sure that they were all in favor of doing something like that. Because as I've heard that there are people in this room tonight who have said that they actually use 10th as one of the regular things and don't find that an issue. So again, we want to make sure we don't want to react too far the other way and say, okay, and then find out that residents really are upset by the fact that they can no longer use 10th. Residents in Bankview, right? So again, engage the public up there to say, okay, so here's what our challenge is. Here's a couple of potential solutions for this challenge. No one's going to be totally happy, right? Absolutely, but how are we best going to mitigate traffic and protect our citizens, which really is number one.
Jay?
Thanks for that, Daryl. Yeah, I would just want to add and rebuttal to some of what's been said. Is I think it's incumbent on council to make as many evidence-based decisions as possible, not on feelings. And so again, that's the opportunity we have in front of us is to evaluate the most recent change, despite how people might feel, which certainly, again, given my experience with people and the situation, is a hyperbolic exaggeration. But the opportunity here to just see if what's already been implemented has the desired impact, I think it's considerably better than even the chance of driving more traffic whose intention is to cut time off of their travels and to push them towards a playground zone inadvertently, or I can't even use the word inadvertently. It would be with knowledge that is a potential outcome from the four-way stop. Every time that there's some change, there's always going to be some people who say you're ruining the property value. That never comes to pass. If we were to consider closing off 10th, imagine the impact that it might have on the people who live closest to that end of 10th, and the ability to sell those lots if it were to abut on a dead end as opposed to a thoroughfare. So, yeah, I reiterate that we should be focusing on making the best decision we can, but not necessarily on feeling.
Anybody else? Okay, a very smart person said to me, I ran to serve the people, not to be a politician. And I feel very strongly about that comment. See, my phone and my emails have gone off the wall, and as you can say, I'm a shiny new object, but I don't think it's that. I think it's I'm listening and I'm hearing. So I went on to the corner of 1st and 10th. I sat there for about 6 minutes 17 vehicles came up first and cut across 10th. You could see they were mad that they hit the speed bump, but then they just hit the gas. And I watched them go straight through. So if I lived in that area, I would be some shook. You sat here and said there's 600 vehicles monitored through there. There's not even 4 homes or 5 homes. I mean, that's a perfect, beautiful little community. If you closed off 10th, had that where that, I think we'd actually sell that area off. But right now, I wouldn't want to live in that thoroughfare. Then you come up, so I personally agree with whoever has said that that should be closed off. And I have probably 7 emails and 14 phone calls that can, and I don't know how many people live in that area, but there's got to be, 30 some homes? I've probably heard from 27 of them. And I'm 100% this should go public to the people and then they should choose. But then talking about this trying to be a connector, I mean, we had our transportation company on that corner of 7th for, 20 some years. Never was that a connector. It was always a 4-way stop or a 2-way that way. And then now I'm getting calls from people that live along 7th going up. They don't want it to be a raceway either. So I'm not sure why just putting 4-way stop there is such a big deal. And I'm not sure why 10th is such a big deal to close off. I realize that you guys are the experts and you know, and we should trust, but I'm also a citizen. And if I lived on either one of those, I would be seriously unhappy with that much traffic flying through my neighborhood. And I don't know if it's just me, but that road is pretty narrow. And then you add all those trailers out the front. I mean, those kids haven't got a hope with that much traffic flying through there. So, Daryl, I hope that you're saying there's going to be an open house for July. I am so excited to hear that. I think the people that live in those areas have to have a voice. And as you both have said, this has been talked about, you said that this has been talked about 2 years prior to you coming here. It's been on the council table. Let's get it out there and give these people a voice. And at the end of the day, I'm with everybody else, whatever they agree upon, the majority. But let's hear them out. And yes, we made a decision, and I don't ever want to insult administration for whatever decisions are made. But at the same time, this thing has become very controversial, and it's about the people. At the end of the day, it's about the people. So I hope that a date can be set sooner than later, and we can get this thing, because I would love to have it off of my inbox. So that's my sense. Anybody else want to add to that?
Yeah, I just got it.
Oh, Fred, go ahead.
I had one more comment, just as for the closing debate we're having here, is traffic engineers built the co-op parking lot. Traffic engineers put the right-hand corner at the top of the road going into the Walmart, the one that can't fit 2 trucks side by side. Traffic engineers put this thing in the end of the street down here, closed off traffic to our community. Traffic engineers put that thing down the street on the other side of the bridge that takes 2 lanes back to 1 lane, back to 2 lanes. And I know that there's reasons and all that, but sometimes it just doesn't make common sense. There's got to be a mix of knowledge and then evaluation of that and then what the people want, and then you have the answer, right? That's what we should have. It's just a mix of all those together.
Daryl?
Somewhat. Oh, Councilor.
Jay?
This is a point of order, Your Worship. It's a point of decorum that we don't raise our voices at council. And I find it always very hard to interface with people who don't trust experts. But the idea that this has been on the council table for 2 years is false. Council does not debate, in typical fashion, traffic stops. It's an entirely operational issue, which is under the strict purview of the CAO for a reason, expertise. And so it has not been up for discussion or debate at council a number of times. And I'm not 100% sure, because again, you said it yourself about serving the people. when you know more than the average citizen because you've listened to what the expert opinion is about what the overall bigger picture purpose is, that's also what people have elected you to do, is to become more aware than they could possibly be about how a municipality operates. And to explain that situation. And that's going to absolutely make some people unhappy some of the time. And in some cases, a much smarter person than me said, you're doing it right when everybody's a little bit unhappy. But the idea of closing that street off, I hope will only happen with the consultation of everyone in the two neighborhoods that we're talking about, because it is certainly become a major traffic concern without question. But I would just make sure that council understands that this is not something that we've just punted down the road. Us weighing in to this level on an issue of this size is unprecedented.
Nope, thanks for that. I just, at the end of the day, I think the best thing of any things like these that we know could be controversial for the community. That's why I am so glad that we are going to be passing this public consultation.
So just sort of maybe hopefully closing this conversation off. So to kind of reiterate that all of this discussion had all originated from the people who had brought it forward to past administrations and past councillors. The problem was that they were in not true form the representatives of the people. So, right, they were representatives of a very finite group of people who represented self-interest to this. So now again, our goal is what we should have done back then, and this your lessons learned is that we should have said, okay, nice to hear from you, but we don't trust it's just you we're hearing from. Now we're knowing that we have to go out and actually engage the rest of the community and not just simply the few people who felt that they represented everybody while speaking to nobody. So
absolutely. So I'm glad that we all got our voice on that, and I appreciate all the input. Does anybody else have anything before we go on? Fred?
My apologies. I didn't realize I raised my voice. My apologies.
Okay, so we will carry on, and we are now at 7.1, and I'm going to just ask Daryl to give us a fountain update on behalf of administration.
Me again? No, just kidding. No, just kidding. It's fine. No, so as we've heard from through Drum FM from last week, so I guess a bit of a shorter part. So we have a supply pipe and a drain pipe for the fountain, and as well as a number of jet pipes in there. The pipes are pretty much all metal. They are all the original age of the fountain, and they all are corroding or are starting to disintegrate mostly because of the hot soil we have, or the corrosive soil we have in the community. So we had looked at a fix about 4 months ago, I guess, right? And the problem was that we had a company out of California that was the only one that could actually do this work. They were the first ones around that could do this work, and their price was very expensive. We've since had our consultant sort of beating the bushes and found a company that is in Alberta that can do this work. And what we're looking for is basically for them to slip line the pipes. So there's an 8-inch and a 4-inch pipe that needs to get basically a plastic coating on the inside. The challenge is that work happens all the time on sewers. However, those are always straight line pipes. This is actually bends and elbows and a bunch of other fittings. And that's a very specialized work. And again, the company that does it in Alberta, their specialty is hospital work. So they go into hospitals and actually redo the plumbing in there for things like that. So we're in the process right now of actually developing a quick tender so we can go out and actually get the work awarded and get the material ordered by the successful company. And the actual work doesn't take very long, but it's actually getting the parts in place. So the goal is to have, if everything works out, we would actually have something fixed by the end of July, roughly. Right? And again, some of it is the two different companies. One's invasive, so that means they're digging a hole down, they're cutting pipe, they're doing a little bit of work to get the liner in. The other company can do it all from inside our vault. So what we're doing is basically going to wait and see what the prices are. They're in that $65,000 range roughly to do this fix for this, and hopefully for August long weekend we would have some water in our fountain. The issue with our fountain right now is that if you filled it up in the morning, by evening it is completely bone dry. And part of our issue is that we have no idea where the water's going. It's going in the soil somewhere. So even the thought of, and I think Armia explained it quite well a few weeks ago about, open it up for Canada Day. Really, you're actually opening it up for 7 days, which is roughly about 90 to 100,000 liters of water that we have no idea where it's going right now. And so again, fixing this thing properly with a liner will actually give us more life for it, hopefully give us life for a long time on it, and will prevent us from having a sinkhole or failure somewhere in that fountain. So.
Fred?
Daryl, the fact that we started to have to add chemicals in that, does that have something to do with it as well?
That's great folklore, but the reality is that we all have chemicals that are in our water supply that we drink every time we turn the tap or flush the toilet, and we don't have issues in those pipes. The reason is that it is, and we have it in our pool. Same thing, our pool has a very high level of chlorine in it. We've been adding chlorine for this is the third summer. We wouldn't see this disintegration in 3 summers. This is everything to do with our corrosive soils in the area. So normally what you would do with, you're putting metal pipes in the ground, you actually put what's called a sacrificial anode on those pipes to be able to take the corrosion and steer it towards something that can easily be replaced. 20 some years ago when the fountain was done, around that time, that probably wasn't done as one of those, it wasn't added as one of those things to do. So
That's good information. Anybody else? Okay, well that's great, Daryl. Oh, sorry, Tom.
Yeah, I was just wondering if the fountain should be on our long-term capital plan. Like you look at some of these water parks, in Calgary and Red Deer or whatever, that incorporate a fountain and purposely built wading pools for little kids and that. And I'm just wondering if maybe our long-term capital plan should look at that as a replacement to what we've got. Because, the fountain was originally built as a fountain, and it's since turned into a wading pool fountain. So
right. And you're right, it's not on our long-term replacements. There are a number of, I want to say issues, the number of challenges. So issue one is that we actually don't own the land there. Right? The land is owned by ATCO, and it's leased to the town of Drumheller. That fountain is up high in there because there are some issues with some of the soils in that area. So we'd have to look at where we wanted to put something like that. And what we had said and committed that we wanted to find out ourselves, as well as come back to council with, is actually what does that cost us on an annual basis to operate that fountain and splash park, and that's something that we'll be coming back with this fall as part of the budgeting process. But yeah, I think you're right, because I don't, honestly, it wouldn't be the end of the fixes for that. Like we're going to have to do something else with some of the smaller piping in there. You're going to have to do something with the concrete in a few years' time to kind of look at. So it definitely should be something that we want to look at. What are we doing? What's the objective of it for the community? And should we be building it smaller, same size, bigger, same place, different place? Right? That's good questions to have. So.
Yeah, no, that's great information, because I got stopped today and asked about it, and I kind of nicely said we honestly don't want these things broke down. We don't go looking for more issues. So thanks so much for sharing that. Okay, and then Councillor Zarisky asked for an update on the culvert on 575.
So the last we heard from the contract, so there was Alberta Transportation awarded the project this year. They awarded it to a company out of Edmonton. They are originally told Alberta Transportation they would be in Drumheller around the middle of July, but just actually after last week's meeting, I think the next day I got an email that said that they think it's now closer to the end of July because they're on another project that's being a bit delayed. So we would expect to see that they're probably around the end of July. I did notice on the weekend that there's a bunch of one first call pavement markings and stuff. So they are starting to look at what's in the area as far as like our water, wastewater, the gas lines and stuff like that. So it looks like an end of July start, and I believe they had said that their timeline was about 6 weeks. So,
any questions?
Yeah, I'm just looking at the traffic problem that's going to cause, of course, for the Passion Play and the concert series out there. The main issue, of course, will be the blockage of that whole road. That 575 will be totally blocked there to east-west traffic, and so all the traffic is supposedly going to be diverted south through the industrial area, through that detour.
Right.
And I guess the worries that we have in Newcastle is that people coming from the west are going to take 11th Street west, or pardon me, 12th Street west, go across the tracks, and then come beetling up Newcastle Trail to get into downtown. That's, originally Newcastle Trail was the route out of town, but it hasn't been for years. And what I'm going to do is contact the RCMP and just make sure that they are patrolling, because there is a playground zone there, McConkey Park, coming into town. And, I've driven that road for 40 years, and the traffic coming from the west at 7:45 in the morning for people getting downtown and who are late can be coming fairly quickly. So that was just the issue for some of the residents along Newcastle Trail there, is that there's going to be more traffic and faster traffic. And
part of the Alberta Transportation's project plan, when we discussed this a year ago, we actually brought up Newcastle Trail and trying to slow the traffic down, and they have included with the contract, I believe, a traffic plan to try to prevent some of the traffic from cutting up 12th. So I think they were supposed to do that with some barricades and no left turn signs and stuff like that. We're still going to see an increase in traffic through there, but the goal is to try to make it as easy for people to cut through the Premier Way and that as possible. So,
and I think we might have to have some, like right now when you have the Passion Play going on, the Passion Play gets out. There's volunteers helping, and there's RCMP blocking the road, letting people out, etc. We might have to look at even extending that down 575, because I think that's going to be kind of a mess. I think there's going to be, just an absolute rush hour overload of traffic whenever we have the Passion Play going on and these concerts going on. So the RCMP need to be aware, I guess.
If it's the end of July, though, wouldn't we just about be done the end of the Passion Play? So we just have the concert series. So that should help that cause. Okay.
And that's what they're last suggesting, is that it would be the end of July, which really, if it's the end of July, it's probably right after August long weekend. So.
Okay, is there anything else on that? All right, so I'd like to, as you noticed, we have the 7.0, the council members roundtable discussion. So it was last meeting, I noticed that, there was a few questions that people wanted to ask. So I'm going to ask in future, if you guys can send me, if you know in advance that you want something, if you can send that to me, prior to, we usually build the agenda Wednesdays, kind of Thursday. If you can get it to us by Wednesday, that would be great. However, there's also times when we're sitting in this meeting and we have a question that we want to ask. So I'm going to just ask everybody right now, if you've got something, just a couple minutes, we'll discuss it. If it's going to be longer, then I'll automatically add it to a COW meeting. So does anybody have any burning question right now that they would like to ask, so that the biggest thing is just if we can get it in advance. That way, just for example, these two, Daryl was able to get the homework done and be prepared. So, but does anybody have anything right now? Because I think it's really important that we do the best to get all the questions out that we possibly can. So, nothing this week. Okay. All right, so I will ask for a motion to go into the in-camera matters. Tony, seconder Tom.